So I wanted to start off with Logic's settings, and I'm pretty sure some of you guys don't work with Logic. It's all fine. I'm just showing some basic settings that might also appear in other DAWs like Fruity Loops or FL Studio, Cubase, you name it. It doesn't really matter because I think the settings I'm going to show you guys are somewhat of Logic, but most of them are universal and applicable to each and every DAW. So let's start off with Logic Pro, which is the newest update. And I would recommend not to update any further than Catalina to this point where the course is recorded, because I'm not sure if it's safe yet. So we're starting off the software here with a template, and I'm going to show you why a template is important to your workflow. So I would create a new project from a template, and then you'll get a new screen, and I made some of my favorite templates right here on the left side. And I'm going to show you guys what the difference is. So here back in 2019, which is already a couple of years ago, I had like some presets and some settings that I found useful, but as your sound is evolving, you also want to try out new samples, new ways of working, some maybe new plugins. So I keep my other templates, even though I have a new one, just to make sure that I do not throw anything away that might be useful later. And then for 2020, I made a new one with some adjustments. I have a special template for creating mashups that holds a few plugins, like Endless Smile is one of my favorites. So big shout out to the Data Life guys to create a quick mashup and also a short master chain that really makes your track pop, even though it's not mastered or mixed yet. That works for me. And then I have some analog templates because of all the hardware in this studio that makes it easy and accessible to dig into your recording right away without having to search for what input is what. Now, the most used one for me obviously is the 2021. And if I open the project, which I'm going to do right now, you'll see why that is useful. Okay, so we opened up the 2020 project template. And before we dig into the template itself, I just wanted to show some settings. And I think that is important because the settings can make a difference in your workflow. So as my screen is a little bit wider than the possibility to record, sometimes it's going to happen that I move things out of your screen, but I'm going to try to move it back as quick as possible. And the screen that I just opened is just Logic's preferences. It's actually the second button when you click on the Logic Pro left top main bar. And then it's going to open up this little window where a few things just are already important to change. When you start Logic Pro, it's going to ask you, or actually I wanted it to ask me, what it's got to do. So you can choose for do nothing. You can go for open the most recent projects, open existing projects, select a template, whatever is your preference. And for me, it just comes in handy to go for ask. When I have this set to ask, every time I start up Logic, it's going to ask me what to do, because sometimes I want to record something and sometimes I want to produce or make a template or, you know, maybe make a mashup or just play around on the piano. And this is just really handy to make sure that Logic is going to do exactly what you want. Now this little thing here, it's called Auto Backup. For, again, everyone that's working in Logic, it has the option to save alternative versions, and this is going to come in handy because sometimes you make a mistake on a bounce or a plugin starts acting weird, or maybe you just messed something up that you want to restore. And with Auto Backup, Logic is going to give you the possibility to automatically save alternative versions, which you can select at the top bar. I'm going to show you in just a little bit. So there's a couple of tabs here that, you know, are probably easy to change to your preferences. But for me, I kept most of this pretty basic. Didn't change too much at this tab. This is something that is really handy as well. Catch when starting playback, catch when moving playhead. And this has to do with how this bar here moves around and where it's going to start when you click record and all that. I kept it pretty much on default as well, but I sometimes want to change it if there is a part of the production process where you want to have it behave different, like with recording vocals. So notifications didn't change anything here. Accessibility, didn't really change a lot there. Now, if you click the audio tab, this is where most of the important options show up. Core audio, I never really changed that. I think that has to do with how the Logic Pro sound engine is communicating with your sound device, with your sound card. Now for me, that is the Symphony, as I'm using Symphony by Apogee. Also my Axis Virus TI shows up here, which is a synthesizer. The built-in output and display port are just outputs you don't use. So it doesn't matter what audio engine you're using. You could have any brand, for example, UAD, or maybe Fireface, or whatever works for you. But you just set this to your, your own device. Then the buffer size is really something that a lot of people struggle with. And you know why? Because this is really the option that can make or break how smooth your project runs. Depending on the amount of cores and CPUs and the performance of your device computer, this you just have to select the best option along. So in my case, I have a Mac Pro operating the system, so I can keep it pretty low. And the lower you get, like the less of a delay you'll have when you record something, or when you use plugins that have, that are like touch sensitive or rhythm sensitive. So I try and tend to keep this as low as possible. The higher you go, the smoother your project will run, but it will also cause a significant delay, as you see at resulting latency, which is now close to 50 milliseconds. So I keep this at 256, and whenever needed, I put this on 32. But I barely ever change it, to be honest. If you really, really, really want to have a smooth microphone or audio recording, you can always go for another option, which is at the top here, to record something latency free. Now, moving on, recording delay, I never changed this. This might have, been useful if you face some issues with recording things. Now, processing threads is something that is really useful. I would leave it at automatic, but if you have a system where you run Boot Camp, for example, you want to divide your processors and your different threads over different CPUs. And I think at most systems like the Mac Pro, everything works well on automatic. So I would just leave it there unless you have another project running or another piece of software running. So buffer range, this only comes in handy when you have external devices like the Axis Virus TI for me, which is connected by USB. And then like if you put this on small, it's going to react a little faster. But people that do not use some of these external devices are going to be absolutely fine on medium. All these tracks here, I didn't really change. Moving on to the second tab on audio, I really didn't change a lot. There's some plugin latency compensation that is really important to show, especially if you're using UAD plugins. I'm going to drag the window in real quick, which is not showing when I have the preferences open, but I'm going to try to reopen that again. There we go. So if you have a UAD device connected to your computer, for me, that is the UAD Satellite Thunderbolt Octo, which means it has 8 DSPs built in to process plugins. Then you kind of want to have a latency compensation. And this way, you're going to have less of a latency when you use the plugins of UAD on your tracks. And I found most of the issues exist, if there are any issues, when you're using single tracks together with buses. So for example, if you would have a sidechain going on and you put a compressor here on some of these tracks, and you have also a UAD plugin right under it, that's going to cause some latency. And you can easily fix that by clicking on these options, which I just showed you, to compensate. Now, sometimes it turns out that it's not enough, but then I would just suggest to move these processes to different buses. Or you just bounce the audio, and that's going to solve the case as well. So this that I just showed you guys here is really a question for delay. You're asking for delay right now because you have this UAD plugin under a compressor that's going to give you the sidechain that you want. So easy fix is just move this plugin of UAD to the track that is, asking for the sidechain. That is going to solve the issue. And moving back to preferences here, going to audio, the plugin latency here, the compensation, leaving this to all is going to fix most of these issues. And I just named UAD, but it can be any plugin. And the reason why I name UAD is because I use those plugins all the time, and I really want to be able to use them on all tracks. Just keep in mind, leaving this on all is going to fix most of these delay issues. Okay, and then we want to move to sampler. Didn't change anything here. I'm not sampling a lot. I don't know how to use a sampler, to be honest, either, when it comes to an external one. Editing, I don't know if I really changed anything here, and all these things here I didn't change a lot either. Now this is a cool tab, the MP3 tab, and this is just a quick way to set your settings if you want to bounce a project at the end of your production process. This is going to give you a quick access to how that has to be bounced. It's like a little template for the bouncing process. Moving to the recording tab, your favorite recording file type. Well, I don't know enough about audio if there is a significant difference between AIFF and WAV, and CAF I never really use. I just leave this as it is. I wouldn't change too much. MIDI, same thing. MIDI for me just mostly is USB, and I guess for you guys as well. Display, didn't change too much either here. I think there's one thing that I changed, and I'm going to show you guys later in the piano roll, because in the piano roll you can choose and pick between a bright and a dark background. And a lot of people that came in my studio asked, yo, how did you get that bright background? Well, here is the option as far as I know, and you can really make it your preference to play around with that. Going to score, never ever in my life I've been on this tab, I'm going to be honest. Movie, I don't use any movies in my Logic system here. I have better people to work with video than I can, so I'm not touching this right here. Automation, this is a really important tab, guys, because Move Track Automation with regions, you can pick if you want to have Logic ask you how to operate moving automation blocks in your project. I have it on ask because every time I drag a bar, I want it to ask me what to do with it, because sometimes you want to have the automation go with it and sometimes you don't. And if I make a quick example here and I would copy it, it might ask me, there you go, if I want to copy it, yes or no. So this is the ask option that I'd like to keep on, but maybe you're the kind of person that just wanted to always do it for you or never do it for you at all. Moving on, all these things I didn't change. To control surfaces, never in my life I've touched this either. My info, I still have to write down my own name, but I think I can remember it without this tab. So another important piece here in preferences of Logic is show advanced tools, because if you don't pick this, then it's gonna remove most of the options at the top bar of Logic, which you really want to use in your project. Same goes for audio, MIDI control surfaces, score, advanced editing. The only thing I do not have ticked is surround, and that basically is because I don't use any surround sounds. And I guess this option is more for people that produce music for cinemas. That is it really for Logic's its own settings. But then you have another tab of settings, which is project settings, which I want to go over with you guys as we speak.